Εκ μέρους του Οργανισμού Νέων, Οργανισμός Πολιτισμού και Ανάπτυξης Δημήτρη Δασκαλόπουλου, θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω σήμερα και να σας ευχαριστήσω πολύ για την παρουσία σας εδώ απόψε. Είναι ο πρώτος κύκλος που διοργανώνει ο πρώτος κύκλος που ονομάζεται Νέων Αφηγήσεις και θα έχει ένα πρόγραμμα που θα φιλοξενεί καλλιτέχνες να συζητήσουμε για το τι συμβαίνει σήμερα στη σύγχρονη τέχνη. Έχω τη χαρά να έχω δίπλα μου τον διεθνώς αναγνωρισμένο καλλιτέχνη Kendell Geers και το έργο του Akropolis Now. Πιο αριστερά είναι η Μάρο Μichalakakos, η δική μας καλλιτέχνης Ελληνίδα. Και δεξιά μου ο κύριος Paleocrassas, Dimitris Paleocrassas, επιμελητής της έκθεσης. Θα μου επιτρέψετε να γυρίσω στα αγγλικά για να έχουμε αμεσότητα με τον Kendell στην συζήτηση. So, welcome. We're very happy and excited to be here with us today, to see your work, Akropolis Now, outside of a museum or a gallery space. This is actually a fundamental concept that Neon embraces, that we don't have a space, and our space is the city. And our mission is to bring contemporary culture closer to everyone. So through our projects, we're trying to answer some basic questions. What is the most exciting art being made today? How we can present it? What is its educational value? And how can we reach audiences? So I hope through our projects, initiatives, in long term, we can have an impact on society. And I would like to start with this question about the impact that art has in society. And yesterday evening, we had quite a revealing discussion after a few drinks about yourself. And of course, if you've read about your work, there's a strong intellectual and historical background to your work, but also there's a very personal approach. And this comes, and I would like to give us a bit of a feedback on your journey, personal journey, being that you're a white person that grew up in South Africa during the era of the apartheid. So maybe we should, give us a bit of the context of your upbringing, how this affected art, and how it has made your political, but also very personal stance.
All right. Can everybody hear me? It's a little bit disconcerting to be speaking through a microphone, and especially when you have a loud voice like I do. My journey as an artist is very much connected to my journey as a person, because it was through art that I've been able to find myself. It's been through art that I've been able to liberate myself. And whilst that might sound like something very simple for many of you, for me it's been an incredibly complex and profound journey. Now, imagine being born into a working class, white, Afrikaans family during the height of apartheid in South Africa. What this means is that my family, my entire family, were not only were they supporters of apartheid, but as the working class Afrikaans people that they were I was born into the family that apartheid had been invented for. It was this elevation of the working class white people to a middle management, to a bureaucracy, to a civil service. Now, at a very young age, through various circumstances, I became political. And this meant that if you understand what it means to become political, what it means is that at some point, as a kid, you start to understand that everything your father, your mother, your church, your school, your government, the police, basically the justice system, every single person that you trust, every form of authority that you trust, every form of education, morality, value that you've been given is wrong. Everything you've been taught is a lie. And you suddenly realize that there is this crime against humanity going on around you, and this crime against humanity is there precisely for you, but you don't want it. And at the age of 15, I ran away from home. I left my family. I have never spoken to my father since. And I've never spoken to anybody on my father's side since. So it was a huge sacrifice that one makes. But the implications of that are far more profound than just getting politically involved. They're far more profound than just being in the anti-apartheid struggle, because indeed my anti-apartheid activities meant that I was eventually tried for treason, and I would have had to go to jail for 6 years. And instead, I left South Africa, I went into exile, and I was very young, so I was very fortunate in that sense that apartheid ended. Mandela was released in 1990, and I was like 21, so I could go back to South Africa. And the first thing I did when I went back to South Africa is I made a performance, which was a private performance, not for the audience, in which I took the blood out of my arm, out of my body, and I tried to wash myself in my own blood. And of course, the more you wash yourself, the more messy it gets, the more dirty it gets. And there's that very famous photograph of myself with my head covered in blood. It's called Bloody Hell. Now, what I was doing effectively was I was giving birth to myself. Apartheid is over, it's 1990, I've gone back to South Africa, and this is a new start. But whichever way you look at it, I'm still a white South African Afrikaans kid. I'm still born into something that's illegitimate. I realized in giving birth to myself in 1990 that basically not only was I lied to in my education and my moral and my legal and my ethical systems, but I don't have anything that I can call my own. Everything that I am is illegitimate. My culture, my heritage, my ancestors, everything that you could take for granted isn't there. There's nothing I can be proud of. There's nothing I can rely on. There's nothing I can fall back upon. So I had to literally reinvent myself. I had to literally try to start again and invent a culture, invent an identity, invent something that could sustain me going through the world. And art was the way I did that. So it was through art that I was able to come to terms with this loss of identity, with this reinvention of self. And yeah, it then was a long journey, which now goes on until the present, which it's an incomplete journey because I'm still in that process of searching for the self. But it's searching for this question, what am I? What is my identity? Where do I come from? Am I African? Am I European? As a person whose ancestors have lived in Africa for 200 years, I think I could say that I'm African. But as any African would tell you, one needs to respect one's ancestors. My ancestors are European. So it's this very strange contradiction between what I am and what I'm not, and what is permissible and what is not.
So you lived the transition between apartheid to democracy. You have lived a personal transition as well, and still goes on. And I find the link to this struggle to politics, the way the struggle with power, the ethics, it's very much connected with your work, Akropolis Now. And Akropolis Now reflects throughout the ages a transition, but also a strong symbol of justice, aesthetics, power. So how this transition, the political, the personal, led to Akropolis Now, which is also a name, which is, we want to, as Greeks, we would like to hear more about it.
You're gonna have to break that question down into smaller questions.
Okay. So start with.
I will start with some answers, but you're gonna have to have more questions because that's like
your life.
That's like a mega question. That's a mega question. Now, in this journey of searching for self, searching for what could I be, how could I define myself, there are a number of things that I did, a number of things that would take place. So one of the things already before 1990, when I was still at art school, that I did was I tried to understand what is African art. Because of course I'm living in Africa, I am an African, what is African art? And one certainly cannot generalize about a continent of 53 countries and 1 billion people speaking hundreds of languages. But there's certain things one could understand African art to be, which is different than, for instance, European contemporary art. So the most important difference is this, and I like this analogy. Imagine a man in the middle of the Congo jungle in 1850, carves two masks. And these two masks are absolutely identical. There's no way you can tell them apart. They're made at the same time, from the same tree, from the same wood, and they look the same. You take that one mask and you put it in a vitrine and you put it in the Museum of Modern Art and you leave it there for the next 150 years. The other one is used.
Okay.
And in the process of use, what happens is the mask gets animated. And that's very important. It gets animated. How does it get animated? It gets animated through a process of either milk or honey or blood or sperm or mud or any other form
Rituals.
of initiation, oil or substances. It then gets used. The person would put on a costume and would put on the mask, and the process of wearing the mask, it would get skin and hair and scratches, and it would essentially develop what we call a patina. And this patina would basically bring the object to life. And what would happen is, let's say we were all from the same culture, and we were dancing around the fire, and I wanted to speak about the god of fertility. I would put the mask of the god of fertility on, and I would be dancing around the fire with everybody, and there would be music, and there'd be incense, and there'd be all kinds of things going on. And in my mind, I would not say, I am Kendell wearing a mask of the god of fertility. I would say, I have become the god of fertility. I'm the embodiment of the god of fertility. And in the mind and in the imagination of every single other person at the ritual, everybody would say, that is the god of fertility. Kendell has left his body, and the god of fertility has moved in, and we have this process taking place, which is a very different process than Western art, because it's a process of embodiment. It's a process that in non-contemporary art still functions. It's a process that is not only uniquely African, it was all over the world, even here. But that process of connecting myself to what I make became very important. That idea of investing myself in my work. And so this idea of trying to search for a redefinition of an identity, the process of embodiment and embodying was very important for me. So I completely changed the way I started to conceive of art and started to think of art in a much more animistic logic, of the idea of animating things, the idea of bringing them to life, taking dead objects and making them alive, or taking, like putting breath into the clay in order to breathe life into it, to make conjure these magical things we call art. Now, part of that journey and part of that process was searching for, so that was my journey, but I was searching for questions of what is authentic, what is inauthentic, what is an authentic South African person, what is an authentic South African. Now, the mask-making tradition we don't have in Southern Africa. We have other traditions in the animistic logic, but we don't do the masks. There are other things in the traditional people there. But so I was searching for my Africa, my South Africa, my authenticity, and starting to think about things like the first open heart transplant in the world was made by Christian Barnard when I was a kid. So that is something uniquely South African. That's very important. I started to think about things that South African people make, and this material over here becomes part of it. So this material, now, before we start talking about this material, razor mesh, razor wire, we have to go back in history to 1890. We have to go back to the Boer War. So what had happened was, I won't go into the whole history of South Africa, but there was first a Dutch colony, and then the English arrived, and by that time the Dutch had become Afrikaans, and then a war broke out between, well, very important detail, they discovered gold and diamonds. And after they discovered gold and diamonds, then a war broke out between the Dutch, which had become Afrikaans, and the English. And the first Boer War, what had happened was the English arrived in bright red uniforms with a white leather there and a white leather there, and they were marching through the fields, the brown African fields, and it was like target practice. I mean, they lost the war, it was a disaster. But the gold and diamonds were still there, so they needed to come back. So they came back like 5 years later, and they came back for the Second Anglo-Boer War in 1890. And this is the first modern war. This is the first war where they wore khaki. This is the first guerrilla war where they were not marching in straight lines wearing bright red uniforms, but they were the idea of camouflage. And what the British did is they started at one end of South Africa and they burned the entire country. It was called the Scorched Earth policy. They burnt the entire country to the other end. And that way they starved the Boers. And they took all the women and children, they put them in concentration camps. Concentration camps were invented in South Africa by the British. And they used barbed wire. The first time in the history of the human animal that barbed wire was used as a weapon was in South Africa during the Boer War. So that sets the foundation for my search for something South African, uniquely South African. Then in the 70s, during the height of apartheid, a company in South Africa called Cochrane Steel invented this material called, like this, it's called razor mesh. And what it was instead of the barbs of barbed wire, and I've always said, today, barbed wire is for cattle, razor wire is for humans. So instead of the barbed wire, which is quite polite, they invented this very sharp razor which will cut into your skin and hold on to you. And I mean, I saw it many times during apartheid. You have that in the concertina where they would have a truck that would, you hold one end of the coil and the truck just drives down the road, and then within seconds you have a wall which was able to block people. And so this company not only invented it, but they patented it. So it's the worldwide patent for razor mesh. Wherever you see it in the world, is coming out of a South African company. And so I started to work with this material. I started to work with it for a number of points of view because it linked me to my heritage, it linked me to my history, it linked me to the country I was born into, and it linked me to the trauma of being a white South African. And it helped me open up a dialogue and a discussion where I could openly speak about these histories without apology, without, you know, and we could also then I started to try to work with the material in more metaphysical ways.
Yes. Okay, Akropolis Now has a combat element, but also because of the columns, it has, I think it has a metaphysical element linking the earth with the sky, the spirit, with the soul. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit. You had an interesting discussion with Dimitris, how your first time you were in Greece, 2004, or 1, yes. You saw earlier, you saw the Acropolis and you got inspired.
Yes. Well, I mean, let me tell you a little bit about the origin of the specific work. So it was made for an exhibition I did in New York. And it was made just as the war in Iraq was getting going. And I literally bought it from this American supplier who was supplying the American military. And it's the same supplier that was sending the same material to Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib prison and the war in Iraq. And actually, there was a certain moment when we got nervous because the American supplier said that the war in Iraq was going so bad that they weren't sure that they could give us this much razor mesh because they were running out of stock. So, for me, on an animistic level and on a symbolic level, it's very important to know that this is the exact same material that went to Guantanamo Bay. And you could just imagine, you know, it's in a roll, and you can just imagine, well, part of it just cut, and the rest of it is in Guantanamo Bay. So you have this link to a very important social, political context. And before I answer the question about the Acropolis, another very important detail is at some point I was doing so much work with razor mesh that the CEO of the company wanted to meet me, and he called me into his office, and he was curious because, you know, why are you buying this material? And on his wall behind his desk, it was wall to wall, floor to ceiling, pages from Time magazine. And it was Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay and Palestine and Somalia, and it was every flashpoint in the world. And my work in between. And he was talking about his product, and how proud he was of his product. And how, you know, it literally rips into your skin and you can't escape. And he said, he was very sad because he only started collecting these cuttings of his product from Time magazine like a year before. He says he had wished he'd started many years before. So this gives you some importance. And then the most important detail is on his desk is a small photograph this big of him and George W. Bush fishing. So now you understand the importance of this material for the world. And so this idea of the unique South African product is actually global. And this authentic African material is global, and it's everywhere. You know, a lot of people say to me, oh, yes, that's very South African. We know it is very South African. And I have to say, yes, but it's around every airport. It's around every hospital. And if you go to Paris, if you go to Gare du Nord, the train platform between the Eurostar and the rest of the trains has that exact same material. It's everywhere, even in center Paris. It's not something which is out there on the, in the border or in Africa. No, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I wanted to make this work for this exhibition in New York, and I was thinking at that time about notions of justice, thinking about notions of values, notions of, you know, and I was thinking, and it was a stage in my life when I was very much concerned with the metaphysics and moving into more metaphysical questions and moving away from the political questions. And it was a transition from the political to the poetic or the metaphysic. And I was thinking about, and I was very inspired by the Akropolis and the, you know, the columns. And I think that it would not, I think every architectural historian will agree that that beautiful building on top of the hill inspired churches and courthouses around the world, libraries, because these columns, they represent the link between the earth and the heavens, the realm of the divine and earth. And so that's why outside a courthouse you'd have a column, because you're hoping or you're assuming that there's some kind of divine justice operating there, or a constitution is this idea of solidity, of holding things up. And I was thinking, what's become of our ideas of justice? And of course, the Akropolis is named after, it's a temple to Athena, as you, I mean, I don't have to tell you this. And Athena was born with a giant blade where she cut her father's head open and she jumped out of his head with an axe. So this idea of the blade and the justice, and she represents a more, let's say, a more intelligent form of war and justice than Mars, which is the more kind of brutal male version. It's a more sophisticated form of justice. And so this idea of the blades, then, so I started to think, how can I make columns with these blades? This idea of the goddess, my Akropolis. So this Akropolis, it's, first of all, it's spelt with a K, which, I mean, in English, it's very important, the shift I make from Akropolis with a C, which would be the correct spelling, to Akropolis with a K. Because what I'm doing there, now remember I said, I'm on this journey to search for an identity. It's to move away from the Latin to the Germanic. So in Germanic languages like German or Dutch or Afrikaans that I come from, the K would be very present instead of the C. And that's a way of also acknowledging the Celtic, which would also be working with the K rather than the C. So Akropolis Now, then of course it's a reference to the film Apocalypse Now. And the Akropolis Now, so this locates the Akropolis today with razor mesh in Guantanamo Bay, which is a different kind of justice, a different kind of, those columns are representing something very different than something more constitutional, shall we say. And in referring to the film Apocalypse Now, I'm obviously quoting that incredible film, which was based on a book by Joseph Conrad called Heart of Darkness, which is the title of this exhibition. And this book I have been deeply fascinated by since I read it. And what's interesting about this book is Heart of Darkness was written in an absolute emergency. Joseph Conrad was busy writing another book at the time. He stopped writing that book, and he wrote Heart of Darkness it was almost like an exorcism for him. It was a very short little book, and he just had to get this thing out, and he sent it out into the world. Now, what this book tells is a fascinating story, which rings very close to my own art and heart. What he tells is the story about Kurtz and Marlowe. Now, Marlowe, of course, you can imagine he chose the name Marlowe based on Marlowe, who wrote the original Faust, the story of Christopher Marlowe, who wrote the original Faust, the man who sells his soul to the devil. So Marlowe's in the boat, and he's been sent by the company up the river to go and fetch the renegade Kurtz. Now, it's exactly the same story, Apocalypse Now, except it's set in Vietnam and it's in the military context. But it's the same story. Marlowe's going to fetch the renegade general, Kurtz. And as he's going up this river, he's reading the diaries of Kurtz because he needs to get to know the man better. He needs to get inside the head of Kurtz. He needs to be able to catch him and convince him to go back to London with him. Because Kurtz had spent too much time in the jungle. And what had happened is he'd gone a bit crazy. And he was doing crazy things. So when eventually, for instance, Marlowe finds Kurtz, his house is described as the shack in the jungle, and there are sticks around the shack with heads on top of the sticks. So he's turned cannibal, he's gone weird, he's literally gone barbarian, but as Marlowe's reading the story, so the landscape around him starts to change. And if you've seen Apocalypse Now, you see it's a beautiful depictions. For me, it's one of the rare occasions where a book and a film really have a great connection to each other. The river starts to turn red. The jungle starts to get darker. You have these shadows dancing on the river, on the banks of the river. And you start to understand that the journey that Marlowe's making is an inner journey. He's going inside himself. He's reading Kurtz's diaries, but he's actually thinking about himself. And by the time he meets Kurtz, he's actually become a sympathizer. He's discovered the barbarian inside himself. By the time he reaches Kurtz, he can't condemn him anymore. He actually understands the man, and he's resolved himself to not take him back to London. And he enters into Kurtz, and he has a very short meeting with Kurtz, and Kurtz is basically dying. And the last thing Kurtz says as he dies is the horror, the horror. Now, the thing that's important for me about this story in this book is, what is it that's in the heart of every single one of us that can transform from Marlowe into Kurtz? What is it that makes good people turn bad? What is it that makes kind, gentle, loving fathers during the time of apartheid, loving fathers, go out and commit crimes against humanity? What makes that transition possible? And it's something that we all have the capacity to do. So that's very much what I was thinking about with this work, is this idea of a jungle justice. And what has become of, what have we turned ourselves into? I mean, these are essentially rolled up borders.
Okay, I didn't know that.
They're borders. I mean, if you unroll them, they become a border. And so it's rolled up borders, sitting on the shelf, waiting to become a border.
Mm-hmm. But also the word now, which, okay, you took from Apocalypse Now, but the word now makes me think of something, reaction, that we have to react to something now, but also that it's consistent through time. And I want to go to Dimitri and ask him, how did he select this work now for Greece in 2013, and how do you see this work in relation to current affairs in Greece, in Athens at the moment?
Well, we have to be relevant to reality and real life in Greece at this point. And over the last 4 years that we have been doing these shows, that's the prime point of departure. We have to address the current situation. We can't be making statements about aesthetics or so that was a point of departure that led me into this, and I think it was the title that made me, particularly what you mentioned, the word now, that clicked for me, and in terms of what is going on now in Greece, or has been going on for the last few years. So that was what led me in, and that was when I had my first selection. And then quite quickly I came to Maro's work and established a relation. But the main point is that if we want to have any sort of impact on society at large, we have to contextualize art and art activity within society and within real life.
So what you said that's happening now in Greece, and the way we are in a debate about our values, how we conceive society, what's the priority, what is good and evil. This links also with what has been going on as a reaction throughout the world, started from the Occupy movement in New York through the Arab Spring, what went on to all the Arab countries, what we're seeing now in Istanbul. And I know you just came back from there, and you saw how citizens are trying to reclaim the public space and reclaim a sense of liberal life through going into a public space, demonstrating. And I think it would be interesting for us to see what was your experience from now in Istanbul.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, this shift from Akropolis then to Akropolis now is an interesting one. The shift of different ways of perceiving what the Acropolis could be, and this idea of the present, is I think should be at the core of any artist practice. So I arrived in Istanbul 2 weeks ago for an exhibition called Stealing Fire from Heaven. Mm-hmm. And the day I arrived, that very same day, I ended up getting tear gassed. And I witnessed around me a very extraordinary series of events that was literally people stealing fire from heaven. It was as if I had written a script for the exhibition that I was supposed to have. And that's what I've done since is I've taken this razor mesh motif and I've made paintings and drawings out of it. And here's an exhibition of layers of reality where I'm trying to talk about these kinds of borders of the imagination, where I'm trying to talk about these borders of the imagination and these borders that we put between ourselves and the world we're living in, and these borders of the difference between morality and ethics. And I'm arriving, this playing out on the streets. Mm-hmm. It's as if I saw the future and I'd made this exhibition for Istanbul, which is, I mean, it was very uncanny, it was very bizarre, but at the same time, I think that's and increasingly, I think, when artists allow themselves to open up what William Burroughs and Brian Geisen call the third mind, or what William Blake called second sight, this idea of opening yourself up to other ways of seeing, other ways of being, opening yourself up to other worlds, one can tap into those things, because there is no time, and there is only the present. And so, somewhere inside me, I was able to pull out an exhibition that was supposed to be in Istanbul right now. And then, yes, I arrived, and it's the most extraordinary reclaiming of, it's not just public space, it's reclaiming of people in the most amazing ways, the way people are responding to the situation. So, you know, when the Prime Minister says, mothers, you should be ashamed, do you know where your children are? The next day, the mothers go to the square as a protest. I mean, that's extraordinary. It's like a game of chess, but the public are not allowing the hierarchy of power to be abused. They're saying, no, we have a right to be heard and not hurt. We have a right to be present, and we will find a way to get around your tear gas and your water cannons. And we will occupy the city that belongs to us, the people.
Yeah, well, we have to visit to really experience it, but
it's one of the most.
Because through the news, it's not.
No, you're not going to see.
You don't really get the feeling and the reality 100%.
You're not going to see it on the news. And the other thing that what's happening in Istanbul right now, for me, was inspiring in many ways. It was inspiring because it restored my faith in youth. Mm-hmm. I really despaired thinking the youth of today around the world are apolitical and apathetic and don't care and would rather be on their iPad or their iPhone or their PlayStation than out on the streets doing something real. This is a youth movement out there. It's been led by youth. It's political in a different sense of politics than we've ever seen in the world before, because it's not about parties. It's about people. Mm-hmm. And you have traditional political enemies side by side, and they're not carrying the banners of the party. It restored my faith in social media, because I'm not a big fan of Facebook or Twitter. Even the name Twitter, it doesn't sound smart. I'm not a fan of it, but Facebook and Twitter is how these people are organizing, which means there's no leadership. It's not as if you have a person out there saying, we're going to do this today and do this. No, it's a viral way of people figuring out by communicating through social media. Mm-hmm. It restored my faith in smartphones. I can't stand smartphones. I mean, I think smartphones make people stupid. But smartphones were very important because everybody's got a smartphone, therefore they're filming all the time. And I have no doubt that's why more people have not been killed. Yeah. Because the police know if they get out of hand, well, it's going to be on the news. So the police are very aware that they're constantly being... So this is a case where little brother's watching you. You know, it's not big brother watching you. No, it's people. Everybody has their camera, and they're filming the police. And so the police have to be careful because it could be held against them.
And this form of documentation becomes another form of art, another form of expressing and being potentially contradicting with the state, with the struggle.
Well, yes, I mean, and every day it changes.
It changes,
you know,
and
somebody dragged the piano up there and plays piano at night. I heard an amazing story today about what they call, there's a guy who went up there and he was standing, just standing, looking at the flag, and he's the standing man, and through Twitter, his friends let the world know that he's going to stand. He's not going to protest, he's not going to write, he's not going to shout, he's just going to stand. And eventually people figured it out, and more people started standing. And then people started standing in other cities. And then you have these standing people, which is brilliant, because that's pure art.
Yeah.
Because it's not a protest, and I think the police must be very confused. It must be very confusing for them to, now they're starting to arrest standing people, but I think that's brilliant. To confuse, and each day there's just another way of reinventing this notion of defiance in a very, very poetic manner. I think one of my most inspiring was a Facebook image where somebody had a photograph of their dog, and the sign around the dog was written, because you know the story is that they want to tear down the park and build a shopping mall, and the dog says in the text, "If I can't shit in the park, I'll shit in your shopping mall." Which I thought was very genius.
Okay, I will move on to Maro. Μάρο, και εσένα η δική σου δουλειά έχει σχέση με την έννοια της εξουσίας και πώς αντιστεκόμαστε σε αυτό, αλλά με ένα πολύ διαφορετικό υλικό.
Ναι.
Και σίγουρα η προσωπική σου ζωή και η οικογενειακή έχει παίξει ρόλο στο πώς ασχολείσαι και αντιμετωπίζεις τη δουλειά σου, αλλά επειδή έχουμε και αυτή τη διαφορά των υλικών που είναι τόσο έντονη, θα ήθελα να μας μιλήσεις λίγο για τη δική σου δουλειά, για το μπορντό βελούδο, τι συναισθηματική αξία έχει για σένα.
Ξεκίνησα να δουλεύω με το μπορντό βελούδο το 1993 περίπου, όπου είχα αγοράσει ένα πολύ μεγάλο κομμάτι, το είχα βάλει στο εργαστήριό μου, αλλά μου πήρε ένα χρόνο για να το ακουμπήσω και να επέμβω πάνω του. Γιατί αυτό που δεν ήθελα βέβαια να κάνω, δεν ήθελα να ζωγραφίσω πάνω σε αυτό. Χαϊδεύοντάς το μια μέρα και συζητώντας, συνειδητοποίησα ότι αυτό που θα είχε πολύ ενδιαφέρον θα ήταν να το ξηρίσω, να αφαιρέσω το πέλος του. Οπότε, τότε πήρα ένα κοπίδι και άρχισα να κόβω το πέλος και άρχισε να πέφτει κάτω αυτό το χνούδι και είχε τύχει να έχω ένα άσπρο χαρτί και όταν κοίταξα κάτω, μάλιστα αυτή τη φωτογραφία την έχω κρατήσει από τότε, είδα σαν να ήμουνα μέσα σε ένα χασάπικο. Γιατί ήταν όλο αυτό το χνούδι πάρα πολύ κόκκινο πάνω σε αυτό το λευκό και αυτό με εντυπωσίασε τότε και πρέπει να πω ότι στην αρχή και μόνο η διαδικασία ήταν πολύ σημαντική για μένα, αυτή η αφαίρεση του πέλους. Σιγά σιγά και συνειδητοποιώντας γιατί και πώς και γιατί το επέλεξα το βελούδο, κάτι που όντως έρχεται από την παιδική μου ηλικία, γιατί οι γονείς μου είχαν ένα κατάστημα με παλιά έπιπλα, με έργα ζωγραφικής, με αντικείμενα διάφορα, τα οποία όμως ήταν όλα ανακατεμένα και ανάμεσα σε πράγματα αξίας έβρισκες και καθημερινά πράγματα, οτιδήποτε. Και πραγματικά ένιωθα ότι ήμουν μέσα στη σπηλιά του Αλιμπαμπά λίγο. Καθόμουν και ονειρευόμουν πολλές φορές εκεί Και ιδίως όταν ερχόντουσαν έπιπλα και αντικείμενα από οικογένειες που συνήθως είχαν πεθάνει οι άνθρωποι και τα παιδιά τα έφερναν. Σκεφτόμουν λοιπόν ιστορίες, έπλεκα έτσι με το μυαλό μου και νομίζω ότι αυτό που τελικά έκανα ήταν ότι κατά κάποιο τρόπο, έτσι σαν μια μικρή θεά, ήθελα να τους ξαναζωντανέψω. Και έτσι λοιπόν ήρθε το βελούδο, το οποίο όμως δεν είναι μόνο... Αυτή ίσως ήταν η αφορμή, γιατί το βελούδο το συναντάμε στα θέατρα, το συναντάμε στην εκκλησία. Είναι συνήθως υλικό για να χωρίζει, για το κοινό πρέπει να είναι εκεί και οι υπόλοιποι να είμαστε από εδώ και έχουμε αυτό το μπορδό βελούδο που μας δίνει και περισσότερη σημασία κατά κάποιο τρόπο. Και τότε στη ζωή μου γνώρισα και έναν χειρουργό, ο οποίος ήρθε και μου είπε ότι έχω κάποια εργαλεία που νομίζω είναι τα καλύτερα. Γιατί η αλήθεια είναι ότι όταν ξύριζα με το κοπίδι, όταν με πιάνει ο ίστρος και ξύριζα, το κόβα. Όταν το κόβα δεν υπήρχε επιστροφή, ούτε το όραβες, ούτε τίποτα. Πέταγες όλο το υλικό. Οπότε με αυτά τα νηστέρια τα ειδικά, τα κοχλιάρια, μπορεί κανείς να αφαιρέσει όλο το πέλος με μια φοβερή ακρίβεια, χωρίς όμως να ασκήσει ποτέ την ύφανση, αυτό που κρατάει ουσιαστικά το βελούδο. Όλο αυτό το process, όλη αυτή τη διαδικασία μου άρεσε πάρα πολύ, γιατί πάντα νόμιζα ότι θα ανακαλύψω κάτι. Βέβαια, πάντα με σταματούσε κάτι. Οπότε...
Και σε αυτή τη διαδικασία της αφαίρεσης υπάρχει ακριβώς αυτό το ίδιο στοιχείο που υπάρχει ίσως και στη δουλειά του Kendell, δηλαδή ότι παλεύεις μεταξύ του καλού, του evil.
Είναι νομίζω και
στο τελικό αποτέλεσμα.
Το σκοτεινό κομμάτι του ανθρώπου. Που υπάρχει και όσο πιο εύκολα και γρήγορα, ο καθένας έχει το ρυθμό του, τέλος πάντων, όσο πιο καλά μπορούμε να το αποδεχτούμε, ότι ο καθένας μας το έχει, νομίζω ότι θα είναι πιο εύκολη η ζωή μας. Και νομίζω ότι αυτό είναι και επίσης κάτι άλλο που εγώ βλέπω στα δύο έργα, ότι υπάρχουν, ας πούμε, μέσα σε εισαγωγικά εχθροί. Εδώ υπάρχουν οι εχθροί, οι άνθρωποι με αυτό το πολύ κακό, το σκοτεινό κομμάτι, και αν γίνει ένας συμβιβασμός με αυτούς τους συγκεκριμένους ανθρώπους, μετά η ζωή γίνεται διεκπεραιωτική και περνάμε σε μία ζωή, ζούμε απλά, ενώ αν καταφέρουμε να συμβιβαστούμε με το αναπόφευκτο, νομίζω ότι η ζωή μετά δεν είναι πια διεκπεραιωτική, αλλά ίσα-ίσα γίνεται πιο ουσιαστική. Αυτό.
Ωραία. Και ήθελα να ρωτήσω τον Δημήτρη, μας είπε, έχει ενδιαφέρον να δούμε πώς ο καλλιτέχνης βλέπει το έργο του σε σχέση με το άλλο καλλιτέχνη, αλλά πάντα έχει μεγάλη αξία η αρχική σύλληψη.
Ναι, η οποία δεν διαφέρει καθόλου πολύ από αυτά που ακούω. Και οι δύο μιλάνε για μια εσωτερική αναζήτηση στην καρδιά του σκότους, για μια εξερεύνηση της ψυχής του όντως και την ίσως φρίκη ή και το καλύτερο που μπορεί να βρει κανένα μέσα στην ανθρώπινη ψυχή. Νομίζω είναι πολύ εύγλωτη η εικόνα, τουλάχιστον για μένα, πάντα μου έχει μείνει στο μυαλό την ταινία από το Akropolis Now, η σκηνή που ο Μάρλον Μπράντο λέει το horror. Και θα χρησιμοποιήσω αυτή τη σκηνή για να συνδέσω αυτά τα δύο έργα. Πραγματικά και τα δύο είναι για κάτι τέτοιο. Το μεν αυτό που είναι κυνηγημένο και είναι στην τελευταία στιγμή της ζωής του, ή παλεύει για να επιζήσει, και αντίστοιχα εδώ υπάρχει η πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα αντίστοιξη μεταξύ της ομορφιάς, το αρχαίο ελληνικό κάλος, το θεμέλιο του δυτικού πολιτισμού στην αισθητική, το οποίο όμως ο Κέντελ το κατασκευάζει με ένα απέσιο υλικό, ένα εξαιρετικά τρομακτικό υλικό. Η αντίστοιξη λοιπόν είναι μεταξύ του Ναδύρ και του Ζενίθ, το τι είναι ικανός ο άνθρωπος για το καλύτερο και το χειρότερο. Συνεχίζοντας με την εικόνα της ταινίας όμως, και έτσι για να συνδέσω, πέρα από την σύνδεση των δύο έργων, να πάμε και στο ευρύτερο και το γιατί είναι αυτά τα έργα εδώ αυτή τη στιγμή. Σε συλλογικό επίπεδο η ελληνική κοινωνία περνάει μία στιγμή, η οποία είναι στιγμή Μάρλον Μπράντο, που η φρίκη. Ως λαός είμαστε ικανοί για το καλύτερο και για το χειρότερο. Απομένει να δούμε τι είδους επιλογές θα κάνουμε. Οπότε αυτή είναι η σύνδεση με την σημερινή κατάσταση και αυτή είναι ο συσχετισμός αυτών των δύο έργων δημιουργεί αυτό το νόημα σε σχέση με το ελληνικό πλαίσιο αυτή τη στιγμή.
Kendell, would you like to add something more on...
Sure. I find the juxtaposition of these works very interesting.
Yeah.
You know, you speak about your process, you know, with the surgical, with the scalpel. I mean, your process is horrifying.
Yeah.
But your
the
work
aspect
is very
not.
soft.
Yeah, it's very
My
soft.
work is very soft,
Yeah.
but the idea is horrifying.
I know.
And
Yeah.
what I found quite interesting, and I don't know if you were aware of it when you made this juxtaposition, is that both works actually are about transparency. So what you did with your claws is you actually made something which is impenetrable transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the light works on this work is it's a border, it's an impenetrable border, but if you're on the other side of the light, it becomes transparent. And we don't see it in this building because the light is even, but if you have light on the one side, it becomes opaque, and if you have light on the opposite side, it becomes transparent. And I find on a moral level, that's very interesting for art, because I think that our job as artists is not to judge. We are artists. We're not preachers and we're not lawyers. We're artists. And I think great art should always be in some way attractive and repulsive. There should be, because there's no judgment in either my work or your work about very complex things. I mean, if you're the gentleman who goes fishing with George Bush, you're going to love that material. If you're a refugee pinned to it, you're going to hate that material. So the meaning is the use, and the ethics, the aesthetics and the ethics get all intertwined. As it's presented there, or as your work is presented, the viewer has to confront the horror in their heart. And the viewer has, I mean, it's an invitation, but there's no judgment. So the viewer has to decide, well, I love it or I hate it. And this process of finding an aesthetic decision about good or bad brings up an ethical position about good and bad. And I think great art does that. The ethics and the aesthetics get all mixed up. But it's very important to understand that maybe I didn't communicate it well earlier, is that, you know, the traumas I speak about in terms of this material, it's not judgment. It's witnessing. I'm an artist and I'm a witness to my time. I'm a witness to the now. And I propose complexity and contradiction. And I think you do it in your work as well, because in some ways the fabric is very inviting and it's a red carpet, but on the other hand it's terrifying. You know, so it's, you know, it's the moth and the flame. It's this.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's important to just the challenge for the day or for us now is to see what art can champion for a change, and at Neon we would continue, you know, looking forward for this change and continuing the debate. So I hope you enjoyed this evening. Και σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ που ήρθατε.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε.